Thank you for being with us on Africa 24 English for a new edition of Decryptage. Today with Caroline Kende-Robb, Senior Director, Strategy and Operational Policies at AfDB, where we discuss the bank's 10-year strategy. Mrs. Kende-Robb, welcome to Africa 24 English. The theme of the 2024 AfDB annual meetings was Africa's Transformation, the Africa Development Bank Group, and the reform of the global financial architecture. In your opinion, what are the challenges for the continent, particularly in the areas of renewable energies, fight against food insecurity, and regional integration?
Thank you for the question, and just to let you know, we've just launched our 10-year strategy. It was a great session here. It was actually yesterday, and I think the strategy itself touches on those three issues, right? So if we look at the strategy and its operational priorities, these are in fact called the high fives, and those high fives are to light up and power Africa, to feed Africa, to industrialize Africa, to integrate Africa, and the quality of life, to improve the quality of life of Africans. So the issues around renewable energy and to power Africa and light up Africa are critical for Africa's transformation. But what we also see is in the agriculture and food sector, as well as the energy sector, these sectors are being disrupted. So when we did the strategy, we looked at what would be going on over the next 10 years. And it's really important that African countries are focusing on these two sectors. And this is also what governments are telling us. They're saying we need to invest more in agriculture as a business, not a development project. And we need to invest more on powering and lighting up Africa.
As AfDB celebrates its 60th anniversary, it has also engaged in a 10-year strategy which covers a number of domains. Can you give us some details?
Well, it's certainly a very important question. And I think what many of the multilateral development banks, the MDBs, are realizing that we are at the moment sitting in a time of multiple crises. But at the same time, many countries have really very, very important ambitions. So we need to scale up, we need to be more efficient, we need to have far more bigger, transformative operations. So all MDBs are thinking about how do we scale up our financing with urgency, because we can see these multiple crises, whether it's climate or food insecurity or energy insecurity. A lot of these crises, which are global as well as regional, are impacting upon our countries. So we as a system are looking at how we can increase our financing. But critical to that is we know that we can't do it alone. We need partners, and a key partner will be the private sector.
Africa grew by an average of 4.3% between 2000 and 2022, outpacing the global average of 2.9% over the same period. However, the underlying structure of African economies has not changed significantly. What could explain the situation?
So what's really interesting, it's right that African countries have seen better growth than many countries across the world. And what we have outlined in the strategy is that many African countries have resilience. And of course, this is a positive thing, but at the same time, the economies still need to be structured. We need to put in policies that are enabling the private sector to invest. We need to look at a whole slew of issues around resilience. So how can we ensure, because there's going to be more crises that are coming, so we need to look at resilience and how to make economies resilient to new crises that will come. But we also have to look at issues around enterprise development, which is really critical again for the private sector. How can we create a stable policy environment and a predictable environment to encourage more investment in the countries of Africa and across the continent, which, by the way, is not as risky as many people perceive it to be.
Some experts believe that the sectoral composition of economic growth and employment in Africa has not changed since the 1990s, with agriculture still accounting for almost half of Africa's total workforce. Most countries remain highly dependent on export of raw materials and are therefore very vulnerable to the volatility of world prices and external shocks. How can this situation be remedied?
And I think that's a critical point when we look forward over the next 5 or 10 years. And it's even a critical, urgent point for today. So we have a situation where we don't have food security in a lot of countries, actually globally. It's a global challenge. Food security is a global challenge. And for Africa, in some areas, we have a massive food import bill. But what we have shown in our strategy is that Africa could be a huge exporter of agriculture. So the bank in itself is leading many of the innovations around agriculture. But linked to that is young people. I mean, ultimately our strategy is about people, but we have this huge focus on young people. And agriculture can be like not a development project, like I said, but this huge business opportunity. So a lot of the strategy talks about how can we encourage young people and with huge aspirations to be entrepreneurs. What do we need to do to help support governments, support young people, and many enterprises that can invest in.
With over 25 countries in debt distress or high risk of debt distress, and with interest rates once again very high, continued dependence on external resources for development brings in major challenges. Against this backdrop, what are the urgent reforms that African institutions and decision makers need to undertake in order to finance their economies differently?
So it's one of the high fives, that is to integrate Africa. And also the African Development Bank is doing a lot with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So there's a huge amount of potential there. There's a lot already been done. In addition to that, there's a discussion about global and regional public goods. Now, they of themselves demand that we think cross-border. So a lot of our operations, the new ones that we're looking at the moment, we want to go bigger in the size of the operations, and we want to ensure that the operations are able to work across border. We do quite a lot of those now. We want to do them more. And in addition, we want them to be larger. So this is where we actually wrap in issues of global and regional public goods with a regional integration agenda.
Mrs. Kende-Robb, thank you very much for answering Africa 24's English questions.